Today, we're going to talk about training intelligence, defining the QT 2.0 block periodization model. This is going to be our first installment in a three-part series that I refer to as the training intelligence. So, what is the QT 2.0 block periodization model? The block periodization model aims to maximize training adaptation efficiency by minimizing the interference effect that occurs when trying to work on too many things all at once. Throughout the course of the training intelligence series, the three presentations, we will cover each of these following objectives. We're going to try to understand the power of the QT 2.0 block periodization model, understand the aim and purpose of each block type, see how default seasonal maps are built. Let me just move myself. Understand the role of physiological testing in the decision framework, differentiate physiological versus practical block decisions, and apply decision-making logic to real athletes. Again, the QT 2.0 block periodization model is a structured, flexible, and data-driven decision-making framework that gives the coach the tools to make informed decisions that are best for the athlete. Hold on. All right, so why block periodization? Number one, it allows us to give the athlete exactly what they need when they need it. And then we are also able to make decisions that are made on a practical or a physiological basis. Essentially, what we want to do is maximize the athlete's return on investment in their training by focusing on their specific needs, whether they are practical or physiological. The benefits are because of focus blocks, we can have deeper adaptations. We have single primary stressors per block, which maximizes gains. This matches the science with the athlete's needs, and we have greater efficiency in training adaptation. Essentially, what we are doing is avoiding the interference effect of training that can occur by trying to work on too many energy systems all at once when some energy systems in an athlete may not be necessary or may not be the lowest hanging fruit that we can accomplish. So, what are our block types? But first, let's talk about the architecture, the athletic architectural model. Okay, as outlined by Phil Skiba. First, we have a house model. We have the base, the floor. That is our aerobic fitness. Okay, in each of the houses, this always represents our durability, our fatigue resistance, our general fitness. Okay, then we have the ceiling of the house, and that represents our critical power or our critical speed, essentially our critical intensity. We have the roof of the house, and that represents our power or speed at VO2 max. And then we have the very peak of the house, and that is our top end speed or top end power, which typically speaking in endurance sports, we're less concerned about. Um, okay, so during a base durability block of training, okay, we focus on building out the size of the foundation of the house. As the house gets wider, you can imagine the entire house getting larger, and with it, the critical intensity, the ceiling goes higher and the roof goes higher. So our critical intensity increases. Also, so does our power or speed at VO2 max, and that's the primary purpose of the base durability block. During a build threshold block, we are essentially aiming to increase we have too much physiological attic space. Our critical power, critical speed is occurring at too low a percentage of our power or speed at VO2 max, and so we work at intensities that are right around critical power, critical speed to close this space. During a VO2 max block, we have our critical power, critical speed, our ceiling, occurs at too high a percentage of our power speed at VO2 max. So it's aiming to increase the critical power, critical speed is going to be challenging because we are stuck up against that power or speed at VO2 max. So in this case, we may aim to raise the roof of the house. Then we have our other three block types, which are build threshold lengthening, and this is when we are in an aerobic state. and we do not necessarily want to try to raise the roof of the house. We may not try to raise power or speed at VO2 max. Instead, we are not going to necessarily aim to increase critical power or critical speed because it's stuck up against the power or speed of VO2 max. So instead, what we do is we work at sub-threshold intensities, aiming to increase the time to exhaustion at those. We have a specificity block, which is very race specific. And in this case, we are not necessarily aiming to build fitness. We are instead aiming to utilize the fitness that we have in the most race specific way possible, depending upon the athlete's choice event. And then we have a hybrid block, and this is when we are in a balanced physiological state. And in this particular case, we work on a little bit of everything. Our attic space, our physiological attic space right here is at the right size. So if we increase critical power or critical speed, we also want to increase power or speed at VO2 max in order to maintain that same attic size. And then we also want to increase the athlete's ability to utilize their fitness in as very specific way as possible. So the first block type, we have our base durability block. The objective is to build the foundation, develop fatigue resistance and movement economy, enhance mitochondrial density, induce phenotype change of type 2A oxidative fibers towards type 1. Typical kinds of workouts are a steady state, low tempo, high tension, and sources of training stress typically are duration is high, intensity is low. Because this is typically early season, and we want to kind of strengthen or beefing up the athlete's durability or their chronic training load. Because intensity is low, we don't have to worry as much about the workout quality. We can accumulate more fatigue. During a base durability block of training, we are typically working in this intense across these energy systems, mostly type 1 muscle fibers with a slow recruitment of type 2A oxidative fibers, where we are trying to convince these type 2A oxidative fibers to behave more and more like the type 1 fibers. Our aim is to alter a type 2A metabolic profile without necessarily changing the nature of the fibers. These type 2A oxidative fibers are glycolytic in nature, but they are willing to behave in a more oxidative kind of way. And so what we aim to do in during a base durability block is to slowly creep into the type 2A fibers and convince more and more of them to behave more like type 1. During a build threshold block, our next block type, we want to raise our sustainable ceiling. So raise the ceiling because our attic space, our physiological attic space is too large relative. So our critical power or critical speed occurs at too low a percentage of power or speed at VO2 max. We want to focus on sustainable efforts that are just below, so just below critical power and just above critical power or critical speed, sorry. And as such, we want to increase the critical power to VO2 ratio by raising that ceiling towards the roof. And this also improves fatigue resistance. Typical kinds of workouts will be sweet spot, just critical power, just above critical power. And the sources of training stress, duration will be moderate and intensity will be moderate. And across the energy systems, we this kind of work is mostly going to occur right in here, right at this type 2A uh, oxidative glycolytic crossover point, where we are trying to recruit more type 2A glycolytic fibers to behave like type 2A oxidative fibers. That this is the sweet spot work right here, energy system wise. And right here, we are just above critical power or critical speed. And here we are engaging type 2A glycolytic fibers more aggressively, training them to tolerate and recover from higher intensity demands. This stimulates greater recruitment of all aerobic capable motor units. Next up, we have a VO2 max block. The objective of this block is to expand our aerobic capacity by raising the roof of the house, focus on sustainable efforts just above threshold, decrease our critical power to VO2 ratio, and typical workouts will be short, high intensity intervals. The sources of training stress, duration will be low and intensity will be typically be high. Essentially, we want to increase our maximal oxygen uptake, expanding the size of the overall aerobic engine. Through this, we improve cardiac output, stroke volume, and that increases oxygen delivery to the working muscles. From an energy system standpoint, let me move myself out of the way. We are operating up here. We are recruiting all aerobic systems, all type 1 fibers, all available type 1 fibers, all available type 2A oxidative fibers, all available type 2A glycolytic fibers. And so we have maximal recruitment of all of those fibers due to the high intensity. This significantly challenges oxygen delivery and utilization across all recruited fibers, particularly type 2A oxidative and type 2A glycolytic. This promotes an oxidative shift in type 2A glycolytic, making them more endurance capable. Next up, we have our build threshold lengthening training block. In this case, we want to increase our time to exhaustion, TTE, at or just below critical power. Focus on sustainable efforts just below threshold. Improve fatigue resistance. Typical kinds of workouts will be sweet spot intervals that grow in length over time. And our sources of training stress. Duration will be moderate, intensity will be moderate. Essentially, we want to improve fatigue resistance, aerobic durability, and subthreshold fiber endurance without necessarily driving critical power upward. As you can see, in our house model, our critical power is right up against our power or speed at VO2 max. Our ceiling is right up against the roof of the house. So any work to raise that ceiling is being met up against the roof of the house. So there's really not a lot of space for that to go. So instead, we want to increase the ability to sustain this for as long as possible, this intensity. From an energy system standpoint, again, kind of like our build threshold block, we are right here across the type 2A oxidative glycolytic crossover. Unlike the build threshold block, we do not have the supra critical intensity work. We are primarily type 1 dominant recruitment and metabolic stress, significant type 2A oxidative involvement, trained for longer fatigue resistance, a little bit of type 2A glycolytic, and we try to avoid the type 2X fibers unless we have like the duration miscalibrated or we have surges in our efforts. But we are trying to increase mitochondrial density in oxidative enzymes in type 1 and type 2A oxidative fibers. And then slowly try to recruit more and more of these type 2A glycolytic fibers to behave more like type 2A oxidative fibers. These type 2A oxidative fibers, while glycolytic, are more oxidative than the type 2A glycolytic fibers. And these type 2A glycolytic fibers can be convinced to behave more like type 2A oxidative. Next up, we have our specificity block. The objective of this block is to sharpen race intensity, execution around race intensity efforts, develop the feel, perceived exertion, and mental capacity for race intensity, develop the ability to sustain race intensity under the stress of position and while fueling. Sources of training stress, duration is going to be dependent upon the race type, as is intensity. This training block is less about building fitness and much more about making sure that we can use the fitness that we have in as race specific a way as possible. In terms of energy systems, it's typically going to fall across this spectrum and be very dependent upon which type of event you are you are training for. So, for example, if we are training for, say, an Ironman, our specificity block is really going to focus on this area of the green uh, highlight. If we are training for a half Ironman, we're probably going to be focused a little more on this area of the type 2A fibers. Okay, during Ironman, we are a lot of type 1 too, but all the type 1 is typically going to be maximally utilized, maximally recruited, and then we're going to be pulling into the lower end of type 2A oxidative fibers across half Ironman. We are fully recruited of type 1 muscle fibers, and we have a strong recruitment towards the top of type 2A fibers. So through here. And then as we get into the shorter distances like Olympic and sprint triathlon, we are going to be at full recruitment of type 1 fibers, full recruitment of type 2A oxidative fibers, and trying to recruit as much of the type 2A glycolytic fibers as possible. Olympic is probably going to be somewhere right in this range of muscle fiber utilization, and sprint will probably be in about in this range. And then we have a hybrid block of training. Here we want to expand our aerobic capacity. We want to raise our sustainable ceiling. We want to dial into race intensity execution. Essentially, we have an ideal attic, physiological attic space. So we want to maintain that ratio. If we raise the ceiling, we also want to raise the roof. If we raise the roof, we also want to raise the ceiling. Sources of training stress, duration is going to be pretty moderate. Intensity is going to be pretty moderate to high, depending upon the race specificity. In this training block, we are working on everything because the system can handle everything. So we are aiming to build out the foundation of the house. Because we do a lot of base durability work in here. We are pushing upwards on the aerobic ceiling, the critical power. So we have a little bit of build threshold work going on. We are aiming to raise the power speed at VO2 max by raising the roof. And then we're also trying to make sure we can utilize any fitness that we have in as race specific a way as possible. From a muscle fiber utilization standpoint, of course, we have our aerobic work down here, which is all typically type 1 work. We have our build threshold work, so raising the ceiling here to this little red box right there, right at the type 2A oxidative glycolytic crossover point. We have our we have our VO2 max work where we are fully recruiting the entire aerobic system, okay, in an attempt to raise the roof of our house. And then we have our race specific work. And where we are, just like the specificity block, which type of where we are in energy system wise is going to be very dependent upon what kind of race we are training for. We have one final block that I didn't speak of earlier. It's our rebuild reset block. And this is really not training that is aimed towards fitness of any kind. We have one goal in it. We want to recharge the battery in the engine. So I don't even include the critical intensity in here. We want to make sure that this typically comes at the end of a season, or if we've gone through a very, very stressful and challenging block of training. We want to utilize this time to tone things way down, recharge, reset, rebuild, absorb adaptations, restore training freshness. We want a reset that is both mental and physical. We don't even think about critical power and VO2 ratio. Everything is low. Duration is low. Intensity is low. It's a very important training block type. And then lastly, we just have just a little graphic to kind of give us a sense of how the training stress interplays between duration and intensity, depending upon the block type. So over here on the y-axis, we have total training stress, which is really just a summation of duration and intensity. Um, and then on the x-axis, we have the different block types. And as you can see, when intensity is low, like for example, in a base durability block, the the duration can be high, and we can allow during something like a base durability block, we can allow a lot of fatigue to accumulate, and we can grow fitness relatively quickly because we don't have to worry as much about the workout quality of the block. As intensity increases, we need to keep an eye on fatigue accumulation, typically by limiting duration in order to protect workout quality. So as you can see, as during a build threshold block, as intensity comes up, increases from where base durability was, duration is going to come down. During a VO2 max block, intensity is very high. So that is the primary source of our training stress. Therefore, our duration will tend to be low. The build threshold lengthening block is similar to a build threshold block. The only difference is that it's a little less intense because we don't have that uh, supra threshold work pulling up on the critical intensity. Specificity specificity is very dependent upon the the uh, the type of race that we are training for. So in an Ironman, the relative intensity will be somewhat low during a half for training for a half Ironman. It will be a bit higher. Training for an Olympic, it'll be pretty high. And then during a hybrid block type, we have plenty of intensity. We also have plenty of duration. And that is pretty similar to a build threshold block with plenty of elements of VO2 max. Then, of course, during a rebuild reset, we have pretty much everything is low, duration is low, and training intensity is low. Training stress generally is low because again, we are trying to absorb all of the training that we have done. So those are the that is part one of our QT 2.0 block periodization model, the different block types. Any questions, please feel free to reach out, www.qt2systems.com. You can email us at services@qt2systems.com or check us out on any of the social media platforms.